And I welcome everyone to PressTV's news review program, where we get in-depth in one of the day's top stories. U.S. says that it's shot down what it calls a Chinese spy balloon that's flown across America over the past week. U.S. military said its fighter jets downed the balloon with a missile over the Atlantic Ocean when it floated off the southeastern coast of the country. The military had previously warned that a shoot-down over land could risk casualties on the ground. The Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the balloon was being used by China to surveil strategic sites in the continental U.S. China, however, said the balloon was for civilian meteorological purposes and it had strayed into U.S. airspace. The incident brought a new low to already tense relations between the two nations. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken postponed his visit to China over this very incident. And now joining us for the program is Colin Campbell, Press TV correspondent, joining us from Washington, D.C., and Matthew Ehret, political analyst, joining us from Montreal. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. Colin, we're going to start with you. The latest, if you can, please.
Yeah, well, now we know that the balloon is down, and it has something that was really part of the U.S. headlines over the past few days as this balloon traveled on a southeastern trajectory from the western part of the United States and Idaho all the way towards the Atlantic Ocean over states like South Carolina, where there were some residents and tourists who saw the balloon from the beach. But it sounds like what happened was President Biden, had ordered that the balloon be taken out of the air this past Wednesday. But because of security concerns, safety concerns, the Pentagon delayed that action until this afternoon when they set a fighter jet up there and took it down with a Sidewinder missile. Now they will collect the debris and collect all the parts. And of course, look at it and analyze it to see exactly what the balloon may have collected, what information it may have taken, and to see if the Chinese assertions about what the balloon was up there for, which was for meteorological observance, if that was really accurate. Because, of course, as you just said, the Secretary of Defense Austin said that it was used to surveil security sites. So, of course, there's a mile of difference between the two, just looking at weather versus looking at collecting intelligence. So we'll see what that's over.
Thank you, Colin. And Mr. Ehret, welcome to the program, sir. Hope you're doing well out there in Montreal. Your initial thoughts on why you feel there's such a splash around this balloon over the last few days, especially politically between the right and left in America?
Well, without having all of the information, as Mr. Campbell pointed out, there's only so much we can say. It is a very weird story which has completely gripped the news cycle in the West. I think that there's the smell of a lot of theater attached to this thing. One thing that that did strike me is that the Chinese Foreign Ministry did make the point that, Blinken said that he will be canceling his trip, but we were never told that there was going to be a trip on February 5th to the 6th to begin with. So it does seem that the Chinese side didn't even know that Antony Blinken was expecting to even go, so the idea that he just canceled it, it again does seem like a bit of contrived theater, and the fact that this is overwhelmingly taking over the news cycle and trying to drive Westerners into hysterics and fear around the selected enemy image, which is China, that the handlers of mass perception wish to induce everybody into a fear state around. That is something which is circumspect, and I do look forward to the actual forensics being done on the actual machinery of what I imagine will prove to be truly a meteorological piece of equipment that did get set off course due to unexpected wind currents, but we'll see.
And Colin, this assertion that the Chinese are saying that it's a meteorological balloon that's for weather research and whatnot, because I've heard the Pentagon say that it was not a risk. There's no risk, a military threat as a result of it. Obviously, it could be used to surveil, but I've also heard that there are dozens of Chinese satellites above continental U.S. that are doing exactly that 24/7 and vice versa. You got U.S. satellites well over China conducting surveillance and other adversaries and whatnot. So the balloon wasn't really necessary for that end to achieve something like that. So my question to you then, as from what we know right now, does it seem like things are pointing in the direction that perhaps the Chinese might be telling the truth here?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. We won't know until they really dissect the equipment to find out. It reminds me of that 80s song 99 Red Balloons when it was flying over, and the headlines were all of a sudden talking about this balloon flying over the United States coming from China. We even heard from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who said that he definitely agreed with the U.S. decision to down this balloon in accordance with the bilateral group NORAD. So it was something that people had been anticipating, and because the reason when we're looking at the relationship between China and the United States, we have to say right now it's tenuous at best. When we look at some of the foreign concerns dealing with Taiwan, that have dealt with Hong Kong, that have dealt with the human rights concerns dealing with Uyghurs. So, these are things that are at the top of mind when thinking about China and the relationship that U.S. and China have right now, which definitely could be better. And so when you have this balloon just kind of waywardly flying over the U.S., of course there are going to be a lot of people talking about it. There are going to be lots of concerns, and there are going to be lots of theories surrounding the reason why this balloon is up there in the first place. So now that it's shot down, now that it is no longer flying above the United States, and they will be looking at those parts, we can imagine that in upcoming days, they'll be discovering and telling us, at least in some part, maybe not everything, but in some part, what this balloon was up there for. And we can also see how Republicans may use this opportunity to take it to the Biden administration for their delay of downing the balloon, because that is just the politics of Washington.
And that's the thing we say, Ehret. I'm going to let you get the last word in. You mentioned, to an extent, theater involved here. We know that even if at the least this is just a meteorological research, like the Chinese are saying, balloon up there, the U.S. has been running with it for a few days now, especially Republicans, violation of our airspace, our adversary, the Chinese. First it was Corona, then it was, before Corona, it was infringements of intellectual property, and it was 100 other things, copyright infringement and whatnot. And then it was the South China Sea, and then the artificial islands they build, and then there's Hong Kong and Taiwan, and basically, and now we've got this balloon, right? So when you have, like to Colin's point, you have things teetering on the verge of toxic between these two adversaries. How do you think this balloon is going to impact ties? Well, obviously, we've seen Blinken cancel this visit. How do you think things move forward now? Because nevertheless, even if it wasn't a weather balloon, if it's just a Chinese balloon flying over America, you know how politicians can run with these things.
Well, yeah, I think that we're in a very malleable moment in history where the Western population, the media consumers, are very, very inclined to desire an enemy image to satisfy their fear of the future. The system of the West is overall in a collapse phase right now. So, of course, there's fear, and of course that makes people gullible. One of the techniques has been, whether it's Chinese police stations, honeypots, infiltration of the Democrats, overturning elections, whatever the case may be, there's so many. It mostly relies upon utilizing unproven anonymous claims that are then repeated in the headlines to induce the state of fear. And then when it's proven that such things didn't actually happen, it's never admitted that that was a lie to begin with, but rather we just stopped hearing about that, and people have very short-term memories. So the only thing that lingers is the effect of the emotional tone, and that's the desired effect. So I would imagine that it is likely that even after forensics are done, and it will be, I would imagine, proven that China is not lying, as they are not sloppy on these matters, we will simply stop hearing about this, but the effects, the trajectory of, or the momentum of the emotional hysterics will continue, and that's the biggest danger.
Thanks, gentlemen. We can see the headlines now. Hindenburg has been neutralized. But anyway, it's always a pleasure to check in with both of you. Thank you both. Colin Campbell, Dr. Colin Campbell, I should correct myself there, PressTV correspondent, joining us from the U.S. Capitol, Mr. Matthew Ehret, political analyst, joining us out of Montreal. And viewers, this brings us to the end of your PressTV News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.